Trump seems to have begun to notice that the only one who is delaying the end of the war is Putin, but he continues to humiliate himself before him. Will trade war between USA and China escalate into actual war, actual conflict? We'll discuss right now. My name is Irina Uzlova, and today with us is Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report in English, and local elected official in Wisconsin. Yuri, hello, glad to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Russia's war against Ukraine, which is killing people on a massive scale, must end. Moscow has to get moving. US President Donald Trump writes these words on his Truth Social. Russia has to get moving. Too many people are dying, thousands a week, in a terrible and senseless war. A war that should never happen, Trump wrote. The American leader also reiterated that this war wouldn't have happened if he had been president instead of Joe Biden. Trump's statement came as Steve Witkoff, the US president's special envoy for the Middle East, visited Russia and met with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. How did it suddenly dawn on Trump that Putin is dragging out of peace process? Trump calls on Putin to speed up, but doesn't say whether he will impose any sanctions or punish in any way Russian Federation, terroristic federation. At the same time, the psychological deadline is getting closer. So, Yuri, how do you think? What will Donald Trump do, or will we see just words again?
We are learning a lot about Donald Trump, for those that haven't learned yet, by how he is conducting himself in his economic trade wars. Because what we see is that a lot of Donald Trump's threats turn out to be, well, all of them turn out to be empty threats. And that is very weak position, because anybody looking at the United States with this administration can say, what's the point of agreeing to anything? They'll just back down, because once Donald Trump showed that he's not willing to blow up the store, he gave up a very powerful negotiating position called madman theory. He's no longer mad, apparently, because he's kind of weak, because he can't play a true madman. I guess he can't be a true Putin after all. I guess he'll never be Vladimir, no matter what he tries. But nonetheless, he would like Russia to please, please, please cooperate, because whatever, because he can say many people are dying, because he was saying that many buildings are being destroyed is not playing well. So he's saying many young people are dying, because it sounds like a terrible message, but it almost sounds like threatening message, like we can kill more. It's a very kind of not a very peaceful, and no goodwill in there. That's hard to find. And of course, the only good thing that can be pointed to is that nothing bad would have happened if Donald Trump was president. This is a consistent theme that has become a meme to the point of, you know, that Jesus Christ would not have been crucified if Donald Trump was president back then. Like no problems would have occurred in this world ever if only Donald Trump was president at that time. We're all familiar with this. It's not even news. But news perhaps is that following the tragedy in Kryvyi Rog, where ballistic rocket killed almost 20 people, many of them children, at a playground. And of course, it was a Russian ballistic rocket. After that, we have a representative of President of the United States, because of course nobody elected Steve Witkoff to anything, come in and speak and shake hands with the Russian dictator responsible for this attack on Kryvyi Rog. And the irony there is that Steve Witkoff's ancestors fled Russia, but to escape this very situation, you know, this kind of people and government and all of those things. They were smarter, perhaps. Well, clearly, they were much smarter than Mr. Witkoff, and then I would say they're probably spinning. I mean, I would imagine they're spinning in their grave, seeing that their heir is now returning to Russia and shaking hands with Putin and justifying all of of these terrible, terrible tragedies and is basically looking for a way to ignore reality and be in this usual Trump realism. Well, of course, we have to admit that Russia is so much bigger than Ukraine and that Russia and the United States should be friends. It would be more sense if we were partners. But reality is going to crush their dreams. Until then, they're dreaming and they're hoping that no one's going to notice. We're seeing that as the United States is suffering as a consequence of Donald Trump's foolish economic policy, more and more people are asking themselves a fascinating question that I feel Ukrainians have been asking themselves as well. Is Donald Trump a fool, or is he doing this on purpose? And this is a question that people have been asking themselves about his view of Ukraine, because he's playing clearly into Vladimir Putin's hands, and we ask ourselves, is he a fool, or is he doing this on purpose? Is he trying to help Putin for some historic reason, whether it's Agent Krasnov or whatever you want to refer to, and so far, people can claim, I suppose, that since we haven't seen a signed contract between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, and even then, who can believe things in this day and age? But nonetheless, fool or on purpose, economic collapse that he's trying to create for the United States, is he a fool, or is he doing this on purpose? What are we seeing here? Because the economy cannot function like this. People cannot invest money like this. People don't know how to spend money. People don't know whether they should be building factories in Vietnam, in China, in Australia, in where. And all of that takes time. And now we have over 100%, triple-digit tariffs on China, and China has on the United States. Things are going to be changing. And for all those people who say, I still feel great that at least I didn't vote for Kamala Harris, I go, you know what? I have no pity for you. Because clearly you have not experienced enough of Donald Trump. And it's going to take perhaps another week, perhaps another 2 weeks. But I believe when we're going to see people who are going to say, I wish I would have voted for Kamala Harris, that's where we're going to start seeing some change. Because right now, this is just a little bit of regret and going forward, even though people who've lost money with Donald Trump, all of those things, and his talk about tariffs, all of it comes down to empty threats against Putin, empty threats against trade partners, but it's his followers that believe in him that are losing real money. And he's asking his followers to now sacrifice for him, not just vote for him, but sacrifice money, a lot of money sometimes, because he's destroying markets. And so that's costing people real money. And will they still believe in Donald Trump, where, of course, the best defense is we are just not smart enough to see the wisdom of Donald Trump and understand in his grand wisdom the grand scheme of things. And the same could be said about his approach to Ukraine and Russia, where, he's trying to pull away Russia from China or whatever. There's always some kind of a magical plan that can explain the madness, but we really just, is he a fool, or is he doing this on purpose? Right now, the Democrats are demanding that there's going to be an investigation about seeing if he's doing crushing markets on purpose, because that would, there's a lot of money at stake there. But what about investigation of whether he's doing this on purpose for Russia? I think that question remains something that we have to judge by precedent, by experience, by his actions, by facts, and by reality.
Reuters reported that less than 48 hours after dealing with a negotiator sent by Russian President Vladimir Putin in Washington last week, Steve Witkoff, the U.S. special envoy leading talks with Moscow, sat down with President Donald Trump in the White House and delivered a clear message that the fastest way to broker ceasefire in Ukraine, said Witkoff, was to support a strategy that would give Russia ownership of 4 eastern Ukrainian regions it attempted to annex illegally in 2022. 2 U.S. officials and 5 people are familiar with the situation told Reuters. So, Yuri, how can we assess this statement, and what path can we show Steve Witkoff?
Well, we can tell Steve Witkoff to follow the Russian ship.
Yes.
But, that perhaps that's too direct. I would say that it's when Yes, Mr. Witkoff is a wonderful mouthpiece of Kremlin propaganda. I think he's been given many compliments on his ability to deliver Kremlin's talking points practically verbatim on American mass media. And, that's so kudos to him on being able to deliver the information so well and from point A to point B. Perhaps he'll be the next president of the United States because the current one really struggles with information. But that's not a new problem. The thing that I think is important to acknowledge with Mr. Witkoff is really a story of two women, because there is Ambassador Brink, who is somebody who, when seeing the situation that she could not support, she walked away. Because she actually was criticized quite heavily for a very bland and nondescript statement about the tragedy in Kryvyi Rog that did not stop Mr. Witkoff from going and seeing Putin. But Ambassador Brink was criticized for this statement because she did not even name Russia as a responsible party. Like, we don't know where the rocket came from. Maybe it came from Mars attacks. We don't know. But the fact is that it was her account that made that statement. She got a lot of criticism, and now we're hearing that she's resigning and leaving the position. I think that is an honorable way out of this situation, because why be a part of this administration? Why cooperate with this administration when you see that the actions are going to be so going counter to your value system? But that maybe means that Mr. Witkoff has no value system. And then the other woman that I'm thinking of is Congresswoman Sparks, whose roots go to Ukraine, who now represents voters in Indiana, who is proud and championing really anti-Ukrainian position. But when you look at her voting record, when you look at her statements saying that how can Kiev, really agreeing with Mr. Witkoff, agreeing that how can Kiev expect to keep all this land? I mean, really, again, realism is this: Russia is much bigger than Ukraine. Let's be realist. And it's this realist is foolishness, but people buy into it because it's easier, it's more expedient. It's like, sure, of course, why not? Let's see what happens. And Congresswoman Sparks completely bought into this for clearly her own political expediency, ignoring the facts that she knows with her, being from Ukraine. She may have views on President Zelensky, but I think that I think it's important to remember that Ukraine is more than president, and that she, and I think that her problems with Zelensky are just are not helping the situation. But I think that when we have people who have a choice between saying things that are just harmful, that are people who are engaging with evil, people who are engaging with dictators and facilitating bringing these dictators to light and legitimizing these dictators and their point of view, I think it's very important to at least stop speaking, and instead of continuing to participate in this, plague that Mr. Witkoff is clearly so eager to do.
So we see, and not only we, but a few writers in the Hill media, that Trump's team of negotiators are enabling Russia's continued aggression in Ukraine, while Putin is using the negotiations to achieve his own goals. Instead of stopping the killing, the efforts of U.S. Special Representative Steve Witkoff are only accelerating Moscow's deliberate attacks on Ukrainian civilians, like we see, according to opinion writers in the Hill. So really, how much is Trump's team really losing to Putin's special envoys, and how is the Russian dictator using all these rounds of negotiations now and in future? We understand that Putin is stalling for time, and what's more?
I think Putin is waiting for people to get so confused about what's going on to not really even care whether there are negotiations, there aren't any negotiations. In a way, we're coming back to spring of 2022, where on some level there were some kind of negotiations, but clearly it had nothing to do with what was happening on the ground. And right now, there may be some talk of negotiations, but negotiations is not about Ukraine anymore, and it really never been, because the Kremlin talking points that have been voiced by Mr. Witkoff are and repeated, but obviously and amplified by Putin's envoy Dmitriev, are clear and loud as day. But reality is that what they really want is they want to defrost and defreeze and regain the money that Putin has lost, that he would like to really quickly get back. I think that is priority. And getting sanctions removed, I think that is a priority, because Russia can talk all they want about how they don't care about sanctions, but they clearly would like to have the sanctions removed. And ultimately about legitimizing Russia again as a legitimate country instead of a country that is a pariah state that nobody wants to deal with. And on that account, we see that just the other day, there was this young lady who was freed from a Russian jail, and she was, as Trump said, a young ballerina or ballet dancer. Clearly, I think that is a level on which he is able to comprehend the situation. And that woman has been clearly by very nice Mr. Putin released and brought to the United States. So thank you, Mr. Putin, such a great leader he is, because, he returned this woman. Of course, we had to return a criminal back to Russia in exchange. And just as a side note, at the same time, United States is arguing in Supreme Court, because Supreme Court says you deported this person, Mr. Garcia, to Salvador, where he's sitting in this super jail concentration camp, and bring him back because you had no right to do that. And Trump administration says, oh, sorry, this is beyond anything we can do. Oh, no, how can we? While at the same time, they can bring a person from Russia. Can we figure out the priorities, please? What's going on here? Why do we have such a better communication with Kremlin and with Russia than with Salvadorian prisons, with whom we have supposedly, have a contract now? So this is just a little nutty, but I think that Russia is trying to solve its own problems. And really, this is not about Ukraine. It's about Russia and the United States trying to mend its relationship, while in the process making the United States more of a pariah state itself.
So that is that at the end of April, Trump will do nothing for Russia if it does not cease fire. Clear?
I think all attempts to think that we can put Trump into some kind of a box where he will be forced to do anything are naive, because we see that Trump makes up his own reality as he sees fit, as necessary. So he will just he can announce anything he wants. Personally, I'm convinced that it's really important for Donald Trump to be on Red Square next to Putin and Xi Jinping on May 9th. That is, I think, for some reason, a goal of Mr. Trump's, and so I think he's doing everything he can so that he could stand next to Putin, and everybody hopefully wouldn't be pointing a finger at him, saying, like Mr. Witkoff, who is standing neck and shaking hands with Putin now, see how much we have said about him and his lack of ethics and morals. Of course, who has accused Donald Trump of having ethics and morals? Show me that person, because I think that would be a first. So it's not that maybe he's not afraid that he will be seen as a bad guy, but somehow I think it is more important that maybe a rule requirement that Putin will only let Donald Trump next to him if Donald Trump wraps up this Ukrainian war situation for Putin. And I think Donald Trump is doing everything he can, and he's hoping that Russia will help help him. But Russia is not really interested. Russia just wants to take over Ukraine. Russia is not making this job any easier for Donald Trump, but he's really trying. But he's certainly not going to, A, help Ukraine, B, give Ukraine any guarantee of future aid, and C, really, I think the logic of Yuri Rashkin, a renowned author and historian on this, makes sense to me, which is to just give Ukraine from point of view of Trump, have Russia take over Ukraine, and then start a war against European Union. Why not? I think that Russia is on a roll right now, and if we're not going to continue to oppose it, it will continue to steamroll forward, whether it is doing it in Ukraine, whether it is doing it in the United States through people that it has in power in Washington, D.C. Russia is not going for negotiations. Russia is going for the win.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And their goals are unchanged according to Europe too. And Europe, we see, understands it. We see a lot of different formats about supporting Ukraine. We see 27th Rammstein, and even Pete Hegseth took part online. But what can we see about this improving of European activity and Pete Hegseth?
I think that we know that Secretary Hegseth will take part in a meeting if it's conducted over Signal. So if that's maybe how he was reached and found, and that's they knew, because his information, I guess, can be found online, so they knew how to invite him. They probably saw that he read the message, so it's like, okay, now he's got to show up. But it could also make sense that, just to have a person there who can then relay back the information of what happened. Of course, you can't really count on Secretary Hegseth to be in charge of such important information because he could be, out drinking. But I'm sure there's people around him, perhaps artificial intelligence, that can then, while he is sort of present, would be analyzing the presentation and then put together a nice summary that can be forwarded to Kremlin and to whoever else needs to have this information. I mean, we're going back to this old proverb that when you make a clown a king, you don't make a king. You don't make a clown into a king. You make a palace into a circus. And so we're watching this circus, and we have our elected president, and he has several people in that clown car that are providing, on one hand, kind of a badly needed entertainment, as they are also trying to burn the world down.
The US-China trade war is not slowing down. Quite the contrary, the earthquake is only increasing in amplitude. We see that China has raised tariffs on the US to 125% and has asked Washington to stop. But we see that Donald Trump has no plans to stop against China with his tariffs. The trade war between the USA and China is unlikely to escalate into an actual war. Currently, there is no need for military action between the countries, and overall, US President Donald Trump is not prepared for this, states political scientist, Ukrainian Vladimir Fesenko. So is Trump ready to fight China forever? And what did you see behind his decision to roll back tariffs for other countries? How do Americans react to Donald Trump's mercurial decisions? And what about real war between China and the United States?
Well, that's a big question. So I will try to be quick because, first of all, Americans are not happy. We see the consumer sentiment is collapsing. This is a terrible situation. People are not happy, including many Trump supporters, because they are company owners, they're business owners. They're seeing that their goods and that are supposed to be arriving are going to be costing them a lot more, and they may not have the money. They may be government contractors that are just losing money from Trump for a variety of reasons. But but when it comes to China, it's particularly painful because we're used to buying a lot of our things in the United States are made in China. So to imagine that authoritarian state, which we believe China to be, that is going against a consumer-driven society, which we know United States to be, in a trade duel. It seems like the authoritarian state, by its nature, has upper hand because they don't care about consumers and the voters and all of those little people so much. So to start this war in the first place was a bad idea, which is not a bug. It is a feature of a Trump administration. Their specializing, their specialty is bad ideas. But I think the really important point here is this. We can judge a little bit about allegiances by seeing who is not attacking who. And we see that, for instance, Trump is not saying anything bad about Putin. And when we see tariffs being slapped on everybody practically in the world, including island of penguins and no people, we see that Russia is not getting attacked. Okay, so we see that there's like a force field around them. It's amazing. And then when we see Russia towards China, we see a very similar situation where Russia doesn't attack China because China, I don't know, it seems like they're on good terms there. And at the same time, China is very much right now is engaged in this attacking of the United States, right? What does that mean? That means that this really gives Vladimir Putin an incredible amount of leverage because he's somebody that is attacking China and yet he is listening to, Putin is dealing with Trump, who is attacking China, but listens to Putin. Therefore, Putin can have a lot of influence on Trump, obviously, and that gives him leverage. And he already has good relationship with China. So I think that this is a huge opportunity that strengthens Putin tremendously. And that's just, the dynamics that I'm seeing being a news consumer really in the Wisconsin forests. But that seems pretty obvious just from what I'm seeing. And so finally, I think that the tariffs, what is the goal here? Is the goal really just to end trade, to stop trade between the United States and China? At what point is this just going to seize up? I think that we see that in the end, Donald Trump has shown a traditional propensity for cracking up, and it's a kind of a Humpty Dumpty, in effect, kind of very fragile and fractures, and then this trust that has crashed, and now all of King's men can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Yuri, thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you for your thoughts and opinion. See you next week. Take care.
Take care.
Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and also Rashkin Report in English, and local elected official in Wisconsin, was with us. My name is Irina Uzlova. Guys, thank you for your joining to our interview. Subscribe to our YouTube channels, please, and take care.